Good morning, everyone. What a pleasure and privilege to be with you. Bruce says we should look through the noise. I'm going to play on those words and say we are through the looking glass. 150 years ago, Lewis Carroll wrote the book Through the Looking Glass, where he tells the story in this book of the young girl Alice in Wonderland, who is in her living room, an old-fashioned word for a lounge, and she's looking at her looking glass, an old-fashioned word for a mirror. And as a child would, she's toying with the image of herself in the mirror. And the way that we see ourselves in a mirror is backwards. And to her amazement, Alice finds that her hand can actually go through the looking glass, and she magically goes through the looking glass and then discovers, just as we learn by looking in the mirror, the world is backwards. It's a magnificent story. It's written 150 years ago. It could have been written 15 months ago about the world today. Because where we found ourselves is in a spectacularly transformed environment. Gold toying with $3,500 an ounce, Nvidia toying with position 1 or 2 as the world's largest company by market capitalization, and India overtaking China to now represent the world's largest population. From a country and a company perspective, it's tempting in formulating strategy to think, well, how do we position ourselves to participate in this world that is dramatically changed? And make no mistake, the rules are changed. And let's just stay with Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass for a moment. Because in Through the Looking Glass, these things happen. Time goes backwards for Alice. It's a lovely thought experiment. Time goes backwards. And so through the looking glass, you remember things before they happen. The Red Queen is going to sow, and so her finger starts to bleed because she's going to prick herself. Up is down. And in order to stand still, you have to run quickly. Words take on any meaning the speaker chooses. You know where I'm going with that. That's what happens through the looking glass. Now, it's tempting to say, well, if that's the change that is underfoot, what does the future look like? I'm trained as an economist, and I'll give you the very short answer to this. We have no idea. And anyone who claims that they can, invite them back. The future is impossible to figure out. It's not to say that we shouldn't try and think about it, but I think we equip ourselves better, not by trying to figure out the future, but ask ourselves rather, are we fit to work in those changed circumstances, and knowing that the circumstances, once changed, will continue to change. By way of example, last year, more people as a percentage of world population went to the polls than any year in history. It was the most democratic year in history. Remarkably, most of those, and here's a big hat tip to institutional strength and integrity, remarkably, most of those elections took place peacefully, without opposition or protest. But perhaps what is even more remarkable is that in 2/3 of those elections, there was a change of power at the polls. Right at home, a government of national unity. Our nearby neighbor, Botswana, after 58 years, the party is deposed. We can go further afield. UK, Conservatives become Labour. Macron calls a snap election. He gets snapped to reality. In India, Modi must now form a coalition government. And that theme hasn't changed because very recently, a couple of weeks back, Japan went to the polls. And guess what? Change of power. And the way that we vote resembles the way that we buy cars. We tend to vote the same way at the next election the way we voted at the last election. So I don't think that this is just sort of a storm in a teacup, something has happened and we'll get back to that previous version in 5 years' time. It looks like this is set in for a while. The one that I left out. This is why you can't forecast. Any one of the three. I mean, if I had said to you 12 months ago, this will be on the cards in a short while, or we'll have 3 really good golfers. So stop with the nonsense of forecasting and rather, let's work with the reality that we know. And our challenge, to go back to Bruce's remark, was we have to cut through the noise. I love this. This is from Tom Stoppard's Arcadia, where we flip between a future and a past. And we have to try and make sense of this dislocation and the dissonance. And he says it's all incredibly noisy. It's hard to make sense of the tune. The piano is out of whack. The pianist is drunk. You're tone deaf and you're sitting in the next room. That's our reality. Now, get back to work in that very, very noisy, confused environment. So in the time that we've got together, I'd like to wrestle with 2 questions that are positioned for today. The first is, how do we prosper? What are the necessary ingredients for a country to thrive? And the second is, how do we build businesses that are fit for that purpose? How do we build businesses that are truly transformative? So I'll start with a game, and there are some, I think I can call these people victims of the MBA. Victims of the MBA at GIBS, where I play this game with my master's students on corporate programs, executive engagements. If you were to choose an ingredient that makes your business brilliant, what's that ingredient? You can do a shout out here. Leadership, thank you. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a picture that I've got here. These are just some illustrative examples. But it's wonderful that leadership is the first shout out, because this tends to be, if you haven't done an MBA, there's one waiting for you. This tends to be the favorite component. Give us leadership and everything is solved. That is by far the most common call. Strong brands, route to market, dominant market share, lots of capital, economies of scale, economies of scope, all of these things are important in building great businesses. There is a however, and the however is, over the last 25 years, we've studied the performance of businesses and studied the drivers of their top line revenue and their bottom line earnings. We studied 2,500 multinational companies. These are big businesses, companies that you know well. I'll show you the data. You don't have to be too fussed by the data. This is rather just sort of proof of life or proof of work. But what this data evidences is that the single biggest driver of top-line business performance and bottom-line earnings growth year on year is economic growth. If you wish for one ingredient to drive your company, and I'm speaking about the aggregate, of course, but if you wish for one ingredient to drive your company, wish for economic growth. It explains half of the year-on-year change in revenue for the world's 2,500 largest companies, and it explains half of bottom line performance. It surprises me how little time executives spend and management teams spend talking about the world outside. This usually happens in sort of mutters on the way to the exco or the manco. It's like, phew, it's tough out there. It's like, well, how tough? About half. About half. That's the story. Now, in this, there's a temptation to suggest, but don't companies cause countries? And yes, there is a feedback loop, but there's a neat statistical tool called Granger causality. Statisticians get up to some quirky stuff. And Granger causality allows you to test whether the chicken caused the egg or the egg caused the chicken. Which one comes first? The country or the company? And causality runs from country to company. In short, the economy matters. And I could give you, lots more data, but I'll just give you an anecdote. This is Pudong, it's the financial district of Shanghai, China. I grew up in Durban, and so this looks like Pine Town with a very big river. I mean, I like this picture, it sort of resonates. Like, okay, I understand this place. It's busy, it's smokestackish. Or if Midrand had a river. Okay, let's not overcook it. This picture was taken in 1985. And from 1985 to 2015, over the next 30 years, China, Shanghai grows at 8% per annum. And if you grow at 8% per annum, it might help your business. I mean, that's the statistical argument that I'm making. So what happens if you grow at 8% per annum? It looks like this, 30 years later. Who builds a business in this environment? Jack Ma. He builds a company called Alibaba. And we could also spend a lot of time with this picture because Alibaba stops reporting their Singles' Day sales a couple of years ago. 2021 is the last year that they reported Singles' Day sales because Alibaba became a company of interest. Understand your context. And the suggestion was that Jack Ma would address this by breaking Alibaba up into 6 different pieces. Some change happened. Alibaba is still in one piece. Jack Ma might be a little bit more collaborative. That's a story for another day. The thing that I want to draw your attention to is the light orange column. This is Alibaba's sales on Singles' Day. I'm not sure if the other one is dark orange, it might be red. I won't be sent for paint shopping. That is US online sales on Cyber Monday. But the orange is just one company, Alibaba, on one day. And the dark red is all of the United States on the comparable day. There's a big story in here. I'll come back to it in a moment. It's about the new drivers of global economic performance, about the new shape of business models. Just as a colorful aside, I love Singles' Day as a marketing initiative because it happens every year on the 11th of November. Why the 11th of November? Because you've got to position it somewhere close to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which are November days. So the Americans are trying to get their consumers to have Christmas twice, November and then December. So that's the theme behind the Black Friday and Cyber Monday. How do you compete without parading yourself in the same shape or form? Well, Jack Ma chooses Singles' Day, 11th of November. He says this is the loneliest day of the year because the date is 11/11. So it's 1/1/1/1, all the singles. And the tagline is, it's anti-Valentine's Day. If you're single, buy yourself something nice because you know exactly what you want. Spoil yourself. That's the idea. Anyway, we leave that aside, but let's stay with China just for a moment. Deng Xiaoping, who is in charge of the Chinese miracle, that spectacular economic transformation, says this. He says, drop your beliefs at the door. I don't care what color the cat is as long as it catches mice. For an economist, it's very hard to drop assumptions at the door. We desperately want to cling on to our beliefs and our training. But I took this challenge on, and in 2009, for the first time, we published this work, a study of 160 countries, data for 60 years, and 1,200 line items per country. It's a magnificent data set. And taking the directive from Deng Xiaoping, we asked this: don't tell me what you think causes a country to transform. Rather, looking at this data, what are the ingredients that are common to countries that transition and transform? From this, we establish the six-pack. Just 6 things are common to countries that have transformed. And here we can start with the big story, the big message for South Africa. Let me skip through these 6 ingredients quickly. Each of them matters. Elevated savings and investment. How much? 25% of GDP or higher. Here I want to be very, very clear. There is not a single country that has transformed without elevated saving. Any country that is talking about doing magnificent economic, social transformation without 25% of GDP going to saving, at least 25% of GDP, is simply not at the game. It hasn't happened. It is unprecedented. South Africa's number, have you got it? 15%. South Africa has got critical work to do in this regard. This is the single imperative if South Africa is to get into the business of transformative growth, because not only is the elevated saving and investment common to every country, but when we attribute weights to these ingredients, it is the single biggest factor. The second ingredient is demography. Let me stay with the investment for a moment. Old Mutual, block your ears just for a moment, because the investment isn't financial investment. It's gross domestic fixed investment, which is highways, harbors, fiber optic cable, warehouses, schools, GDFI. Of course, you need financial intermediation. Unblock your ears, Old Mutual. You need financial intermediation to get from the savings to the investment. That's ingredient 1. I can be quicker with the others. Each of them carries a lower weight than that first component. Demography, babies matter. I've just come back from a lovely holiday in Japan, absolutely magnificent. And I say, and no babies. It's like, hang on, be careful with your words here. There's no prams, there's no babies. The Japanese population is shrinking. Who else has this problem? Russia, Italy, South Korea. And funnily enough, the United States is knocking on the door of shrinking population. China now has a shrinking workforce. Babies matter. I'll skip to ingredient 4 and 5 because for babies to matter, it is essential that education and healthcare are in the cocktail. But before we set about building phenomenal hospitals and magnificent schools, there's such a neat subtext here that it is the first 1,000 days that matter most. And the first 1,000 days are 300 days inside and 700 days outside. The return on human capital amounts to 20% per annum over the lifetime of your baby. The investments that you make in the first 1,000 days are some of the smallest, but some of the most impactful. Vitamin A, folic acid, transform a child's prospects. Openness, look, I made it all the way 15 minutes without saying Trump. There is no country that has transformed by building walls. Every country that has transformed has been connected, but that doesn't mean, the sentence needs to be carefully constructed, it doesn't mean that connection is good. Because connection is transatlantic slave trade, imperial occupation, war. Connection can be horrific. So we're looking for win-win outcomes in openness. Those connections, that by being partnered, we're better together. You might get more than me, but we are both better off. And then policies and institutions. This room needs absolutely no schooling in the importance of institutional integrity. Policies without institutions are wonderful words. They're like those words, I love you. Don't tell me, show me. And so the institutions are the show me edge of the policy words, I love you. Absent the institutions, your policies are absolutely meaningless. And thankfully, this country is in the business of repair and recovery. When we put those 6 ingredients together, we can map the growth prospects of countries. There's lots of data here. I'll draw you to a couple of data points. The first is the red spot, which is the global growth structure. Here's the good news. Global growth is in decent shape. That's good news. We can do the economic bad news. South Africa sits below and to the left of the world's red spot. Our 6-pack is not as strong as the world average. We've got work to do. And that means that South Africa's story of fast, inclusive, transformative growth is exactly that. It's a story. We have to get into the repair of those 6 ingredients in order to just get up to the world average before we get into the business of talking about brilliance. The top of the hump has got some interesting names. China has fallen from the peak of the crown, and that spot is now taken by India. I think that in 25 years' time, when we re-meet, it will be about the Indian miracle. 6% economic growth with a participation of 1.5 billion people. But India isn't alone at the top of the crown there. There are some other really interesting names. How about Ethiopia and Tanzania? Or if we put that entire East African cluster together, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, we're speaking about the better part of 300 million people that have a structure that facilitates 5 and 6% economic growth. But back to us, and for us, there's a punch in the mouth. And it's that what we say is not what we're getting, that things are amiss, and we have to get into the business of repair. I'm not trying to talk the country down. There's a bunch of good news. We have the most industrially sophisticated economy in the region. We have some of the deepest, we have the deepest capital markets. We have the most robust financial institutions, rule of law, effective courts, functional media, and more. And we are resident in the 2nd fastest growing region in the world. It's called Sub-Saharan Africa. And interestingly, the 2 fastest growing economies in the world over the last 25 years are not India and China. It's Ethiopia and Rwanda. If you're going to build renewable energy, there are few better places that the great creator has gifted more than South Africa. So we then need to get into the business of transmission and storage. there are spectacular opportunities in that. And we've got elevated commodity prices. My suspicion is commodity prices stay elevated for a long time, because recently the BRICS Plus overtook the G7 in terms of share of world GDP. And every one of those countries is coming off a low base. And what do they need? Commodities. There is a big story for every commodity-rich country here, and not to squander it, to address the resource curse and Dutch disease. So, I trust that there's some really big stories there that land for you in what South Africa needs to get up to. If I were to stay with that single biggest element, savings and investment, one thing that is very, very difficult to walk past here is the importance of facilitating financial inclusion, and perhaps a starting point is compulsory savings. The immediate pushback here is, but we're poor, we can't afford it, low-income country, inequality. Well, guess what? Every single country that is rich today started poor. Which means every single country that got into the business of 25% and higher saving started as low-income countries and found ways to facilitate that. Think of Singapore with their compulsory saving system, South Korea, Chile, which makes savings compulsory in the early 1970s. Now let me give you another magic option. You can shout for leadership again. Not done with the leadership. If by magic, I've now given you the economy, if by magic you could choose another ingredient, what would you choose? Choose Ali. This is your magic ingredient. Make Muhammad Ali your leader, because he brings two attributes. He brings the attribute of agility, float like the butterfly, sting like the bee, etc. He tells George Foreman he's going to hit him so many times that Foreman will think he's surrounded. Ali is quick. He's quick with his fists, he's quick with his feet, he's quick with his tongue. And he's got absorption. He's got the ability to take what Mike Tyson warned us about, the punch in the mouth. Tyson didn't say that. Tyson actually said a punth. But Ali's got the ability to go the distance. How do we know this? Because he fights George Foreman in the rumble in the jungle, 10 years older than Foreman. Every single thing said Ali should lose. 10 years older than Foreman. Banned from boxing for 3.5 years because of his defiance about Vietnam. The bookmakers put Ali at 10-1. His wife said, if you go to Kinshasa, I'm divorcing you. His coach said, the only thing we have to work out is what round you get knocked out in. And in the 8th round, Ali comes off the ropes and knocks out George Foreman. What's going on? It's magnificent reinvention. New models, new markets, new mindsets. This is my calling to action in this room. What do your business models look like? Which markets are you squaring up to? And I don't just mean geography. I mean, are you building businesses that are truly transformative and inclusive? And do you have the mindset that is fit for that Alice through the looking glass purpose? I'll close with some quick business examples to illustrate this. The red lines and columns is the Singapore Post Office. The gray is the South African Post Office. What's the Singapore Post Office up to? In the late 1990s, they offered every one of their customers, hold your breath, an email address. Because letters are going out of business. We'll offer you the thing that is putting you out of, that is going to put us out of business. Bruce does a show of hands for Yahoo, Hotmail addresses. Yeah, we've got some. We were there. Mail me on Hotmail, Yahoo. Remember those addresses. To log in, it was splash page. And so the Singapore Post Office starts using that real estate to advertise. If you buy something from Alibaba in Singapore today, the Singapore Post Offices are the distribution warehouses for Alibaba. And Singapore Post initiated that by advertising Alibaba product on their splash page. You can also go to a WeWork type environment in the Singapore Post Office. Think of this valuable real estate that we are sitting on, and we are allowing it to go into derelict status. Narayana Health, this is Devi Shetty in India, and by a range of innovations in the business, he gets the cost of heart surgery down from $80,000, 1.5 million rand, to $2,000, with the outcomes equivalent to Cleveland Clinic or Guy's Hospital. World-class heart care, heart surgery outcomes at a fraction, 5% of the global price. So, the urging is, if he can do it, maybe we can. In Chile, you don't get an RDP house. They give you half a house. There's a picture of Constitucion in Chile. And they give you the half a house. Why? Because as your financial circumstances improve, you build out into the other half a house with title deed. They're giving you a balance sheet that you can gear into. For our policy people in the room, Bolsa Familia, this is their social welfare program in Brazil. And Bolsa Familia, mothers that breastfeed get a higher social welfare grant because breastfeeding improves children's immunity. And so there's a double whammy. Not only is your child sick less often, but your claims on the healthcare system are lower. Every person who signs up for Bolsa Familia automatically has financial enrollment. They must go through a financial literacy program. Children's attendance at school, social welfare grant goes up. And so they've gamified the social welfare program. And my question would be, if they've done it and have achieved under Lula the biggest improvement in the Gini coefficient in the last 20 years, if they've done it, why are we watching? Bangladesh, the Grameen Bank, Mohammed Yunus, only lends to women. Women are far more responsible with money. Only lend to women with syndicates, so syndicated loans. Women arrive with their syndicates of 5. The syndicate is responsible for the loan. There is no credit committee. There is no form filling. You can all heave a sigh of relief. The syndicate is responsible for the loan, and the loans can only be made for productive investments, education, home, and business. No flat screen televisions or cars. Stacey Brewer does this in South Africa with Spark Schools. And I'll say it, I'm proud to have been in the classroom with her. And Spark Schools is able to offer private school outcomes in South Africa at public school prices. 3 years of maths in 2 years. Children that are left behind are caught up, and rotational teaching methods. So you go to school and you sit at a round table, and the kids teach each other, and they go home and they watch the class. Why? Because when you understand it, you can speed the teacher up on the video. And maybe, a magnificent creation in the making, South Africa's Time Bank, which is now the fastest growing digital bank in the world, having onboarded 11 million South Africans into the banking system at a fraction of traditional banking cost. Gamification going on. You can earn elevated interest rates if you transact in certain ways. no paperwork necessary to extend a business loan. And they've recently extended to the Philippines, 6 million customers onboarded there, and at the start of this year to Indonesia. So Charles Dickens says, think about the chain of thorns, steel, roses, and in that chain, one golden link that gets you from there to here. I hope I've given you examples, cause for thought, and even more importantly than that, cause for action. Thank you for your time.
So Charles Dickens talks about one thing. And last year I asked you, and 120 other people, of which 103 responded and contributed to a book called The One Thing. And I said, what is one thing you would do if you were president for half an hour and you could do just one small thing that could be implemented tomorrow that could be a catalyst for the future? You made a contribution, and 102 other people made a contribution. When I look at your six-pack of savings and investments, demography, policy, education, health, and openness, if we were going to focus on one thing to start an economic ball rolling, which one of those should be our biggest priority?
The first is already between our teeth, and that's institutions. So that's the one thing. The message has landed.
Right.
So I'm not going to do institutions. I'll talk rather about savings and financial inclusion.
We've got demography on our side, right? We've got a younger population, but the younger population needs some sort of vision for the future that is optimistic and positive that they can buy into, right?
So demography is on our side. Our policy is superb. Our institutions have been weakened and in places had their legs pulled out from underneath them, but they're finding their footing again. Openness, we're not too bad. 3 golfers in the White House. Our openness has got work to do. I think we could learn from Modi, who has, to this point, given a global masterclass in diplomacy, being able to face East and West.
Not that it helped him in terms of the tariffs, because buy Russian oil, Donald Trump doesn't like it and lops on a 50% tariff, because he is unpredictable and unreasonable in the wrong kind of way.
He might be on slippery ground right now, but I think the trick for South Africa is to figure out how we harness those global positives that are afoot. The education and healthcare, that's not my area of expertise. I won't walk into that water.
But the point you made about those first 3 years being absolutely pivotal, point made by another economist in Bronwyn Wilkinson, who goes, feed kids and you give them a fair starting point in society. But that's
if you get those first 1,000 days wrong, it almost, I don't want to say it doesn't matter how much you spend afterwards, but
it's very hard to catch up.
It is tough. You're starting 1,000 meters down the track in a 2,000
meter race.
So the one that I would emphasize, because here South Africa is a power unit, we punch way above our global weight in terms of financial institutions, our capabilities, our regulation, our legislation, capital markets, depth, sophistication, products, way above our weight. But we sit with a 15% savings rate, and the required level is 25. So the pushback generally is, well, what do you expect me to do? I'm barely getting by.
My kids are still hungry when they go to bed at night.
And Bruce, there's a few years back, I was involved in a piece of work which explored exactly this. What are the things that change people's behavior? Almost to a person, if you ask people, why don't you save? They say, well, I don't earn enough.
So the question, how do we shift South Africa from a culture of consumption to that of saving, long-term investment? Key question, yes.
Okay, so let me stay with that. So people say, well, the reason why I don't save enough is because I don't earn enough. All right, so when will you start saving? Will I start earning more? Okay, or if I was taxed less. And there's 2 lovely global studies. The first one is a time series study which says what happens to people as they earn more and more and more. Guess what?
Spend more and more
They
and
don't
more.
say. They just keep pace. And the second is when countries cut taxes, what happens to saving? Doesn't go up. We spend into the void. So what does South Africa need to do? Financial literacy is the absolute imperative. Building financial products that are fit for purpose, that allow people, that don't intimidate people, that there's no hidden clauses or catches, or that you have to wait till X and then Y might happen, and if it doesn't happen, we break the trust. So simple products. And an idea here would be something like cash-matched saving. For every 100 you save, Treasury gives you 100, as long as you keep it there for 5 years. And then it
Treasury
builds.
just fainted, by the way, sorry.
Oh, yeah. And guess what happens? When you pull the cash matching away, people keep saving. Because, drum roll, saving is a learned behavior.
It's a habit.
Saving is a habit.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing South Africa needs to do. And then we need to work on, once we've got the 15 to the 25 or higher, we need to make sure that the investments that we build are inclusive investments, not rinsing and repeating.
What do you say to people who say, it's all nice, good theory, very nice, but South Africa is not a place that builds transformative businesses. South Africa is not a place that creates wonderful things. South Africa is, we just muddle along. Yes, the last big thing that was built here was Capitec. And it's too hard. And the environment is obstructive, and there's too much regulation, and there are too many rules.
Yes.
And we can't talk about an example of this, which is awkward, because here we are on stage. Because what we've done is collaborated on a book.
We aren't allowed to talk about this.
No, we're not. On a transformative business.
Yeah.
Which is a demonstration of what is possible. And I want to talk just for a moment, as an economist, about the art of possibility. When we saw the new executive, we saw a new chairman being appointed, Mteto Nyati, at Eskom. He went in and he went, right, what do we have to do? And the first thing he said was, if you keep telling people that they're stupid, they're never going to disappoint you.
Yeah.
He rebuilt confidence within Eskom and started telling Eskom that they could actually do it. After years of being told, you're all stupid, you're all useless, you're all rubbish, there was no bar to rise up to. That art of possible, of the right people in the right jobs at the right time doing the right things, and if Eskom, and it's not turned around by any stretch of the imagination, it is fragile and vulnerable, but we've not had very much load shedding now for nearly 2 years.
Yeah. So, I was cheekily, I was on stage with him at a conference towards the end of last year, and I cheekily called him Dr. 321 because he had achieved on that day that we were on stage together 321 days of uninterrupted. Sort of 321
And then just to prove it, he went and flicked the lights off in November.
Just to show us. But, it shows you that, what is possible inside of very disrupted, even broken environments. And that's why I showed a couple of South African examples here, Bruce, is, Stacey Brewer with Spark Schools is absolutely remarkable.
She came up to me at a party at GIBS in about 2010. There'd been some wine, and I won't repeat this. I won't repeat it exactly what she said, but she said, "You're going to interview me on the radio one day." It was about 11 o'clock at night, so we'll excuse her. And I went, "Yes, of course we will. That's very nice." And a year or two later, we were talking about Spark Schools and the revolution. But that revolution hits an inflection point where it goes ex-growth because it doesn't get the right support. So you take a Spark Schools model, you put it into the Department of Basic Education, and you say, let's do that, because she's proven it can work. There are so many models that can be done better. And we can do better, and we must do better. How do we do better?
James Lovell, who sadly passed away
Apollo 13.
The guy who brought the Apollo 13 back from the dark side of the moon. He says that there's 3 types of people. George Bush says there's 3 types of people, those who can count and those who can't. Just checking. Shall I say it again?
Okay, we got it.
Mr. Nene. So James Lovell says there's three types of people: those who watch things happen, those who wonder what happened, and those who make things happen. And I've tried to sort of tell that story in my 30 minutes with you. Is you actually want to be all three. You have to watch things happen. You have to observe, not as a passive sort of passenger, but being observant, watching. Wondering what happened is not like, how the hell did that happen, but rather a curiosity.
Yes.
Like, wow, how did that happen?
How's Ethiopia done it? How's Rwanda done it? How's India doing it? How did China do it and continues to grow?
And what has Lula done to achieve this incredible improvement in income inequality and pacification in the favelas, etc.? That's the wondering what happened, but then it has to be done. You have to make it happen.
Absolutely. We've got another question on what are some quick wins for employment growth, but can we hold that to the last panel? And a request again, please, to get your questions in earlier. Adrian Saville, thank you very much.
Can I say 2 words here, and I will be tweet-sized?
Those are 7 words, but carry on.
What can we do for employment growth? There are obvious industries here. All of the labor-intensive industries. Agriculture is the most obvious. For the person who's asking this question, have a look at Joe Studwell's work on Southeast Asia, where all of the economies that transformed through inclusive agriculture, and tourism is magnificent low-hanging fruit. Every 10 tourists creates 1 permanent job.
What's the most amazing country you visited in the last 6 months?
Japan.
Okay, the most amazing, industrious, surprising country, just work with me on this.
Vietnam.
Thank you. Gosh, he's hard work.
Can I go now?
We were there together. Why was it amazing? Because the economy starts at 4 o'clock in the morning, and by the time we went to bed at 11 o'clock at night, it was still going.
Full tilt, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, a 20-hour, 22-hour economy. Yeah. No potholes, no water leaks, all of the traffic lights work.
And they don't need the traffic lights because the traffic moves in mysterious ways we can't explain it. Adrian Saville, thank you very much. Please, another warm round of applause. Thanks, Adrian.